Hi, Yesenia.
It wouldn't be LA without Mexicans, but yo, it wouldn't be LA without Tongva. Know where you're at, show respect to the tribe who lands on which you stand. Shout out my relatives, show pride with no tribal ID. We're erasing paperwork and false history. Attempts to erase the ancestors were done so violently. Bill becomes the new Native American. This prophecy comes to fruition as Michigan all wrong, marching with torches while bitching about their history being revoked. Now where have I heard that story before? They got the cops on their side as they act in hate and violence when it's natives and fair. Cops shooting, mace yelling, remain silent. America intended for their laws to be one-sided. Hands rolling down my cheek, justice in the street. The privileged don't know our pain as they take and voice their way. Tears rolling down my cheeks as we endure injustice in these streets. The privileged don't know our pain as they voice their way. Try to
All right. Welcome everybody. Biali, hello to everyone. Welcome to the Mujeres de Maíz We Rise. And today is Writing Wednesday. And we have a special guest, Jessa Calderon, published author. And before we get into more, I'd like to first start off by saying thank you to the relatives of this territory where we're tuning in from, which is the unceded traditional Tongva lands. Thank you to all the ancestors from these lands. I also want to thank LA County Department of Mental Health that encourages well-being and healing through art, connection, and community engagement. And that is We Rise. And of course, Mujeres de Maíz and the whole team, everyone who is putting this together in front of the camera, behind the camera, in the organizing committees. So welcome, everyone. For those of you who are tuning in, we encourage you to share with others to tune in because this is going to be a great conversation happening today with our sister Jessa Calderon. And I'll begin by introducing her. Jessa Calderon is not only diverse in her artistic talents, but she's a poet, she's a hip hop artist, massage therapist. She's also a hypnotherapist, and as of recent, a published author. And that's what we'll be talking about today, her most recent publication. So without further ado, Jessa Calderon.
Me'iha, thank you, Marita, for having me on. Me'iha, everybody out there watching as well, thank you for tuning in.
Right on. So I also would like to mention that behind the scenes we have the tech assistants Felicia Montes of Mujeres de Maíz and Yesenia also helping out. Shout out to the team. And then we have Claudia Mercado behind the camera here working on the Mujeres de Maíz stock. So let's start, Jessa. I know that I've had and have the honor of being able to work to you with you in different capacities. So I've gotten to learn a little bit more about you and your strengths and your awesomeness. But I have to share with you as I began to read this book, I really feel that I'm getting to know you on a whole other level that really just multiplies the level of respect that I have for you, your work, your family, and your talents. As we started out, we had a little clip of the video, the hip hop video that you participated in. That was one of your songs. So let's start a little bit with that. If you can just kind of share how you got into deciding to write and pretty much produce hip hop songs and go on that path. Let's begin there. If you can please share it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's like a bunch of different chapters in my life that led up to it, you know? And the first chapter I would say started when I was about 8 years old. When I was 7, my brother taught me about, like sitting in ceremony where you're alone. Some people kind of call it like meditation. And at 8 years old is where I was actually told, like it's an internal dialogue that happens. And I was told that I would be a massage therapist and an entertainer. And from that moment, when I stood up from that experience, I was able to write, and I was like writing poetry and things of that nature, and stories. And I was able to put my hands on people and like manipulate their muscles to help them feel better. And so that was like the beginning of the journey. And then when I watched a bunch of guys standing in a circle, ciphering, busting their little flows or what have you, I shouldn't say little, that sounds kind of mean, but busting their flows, I kind of sat there and was watching each of them and saying, that's easy, I could do that. That's like poetry over a beat. And so I decided to stand in the circle and just bust one of my poems that I wrote, more or less, like just kind of do this poem. And it blew the guys away, so that's just like, okay, I could do this. But what really shaped into like that kind of song that was playing earlier, Injustice, it goes into like middle school and elementary school, where we have teachers, in particular, I'll point the finger at me, having teachers that are telling me, for the 4th grade mission project, that my relatives are like past tense, right? Like they no longer exist. That my relatives had it easy, like it was a day spa, completely leaving out the fact that they were enslaved to the mission, so it was things like that. Fast forward to middle school, where I have a teacher telling me my history of, we came from China, quote unquote. And I was like, excuse me? And so we had to have this dialogue. Well, we didn't have to, but I felt called out. So I respectfully backed myself up, and I ended up getting suspended. So it was like I never really had the opportunity to tell the full story on, my version of things, right? So that's kind of where it was like, well, you know what? I write. I like to tell stories. I'm going to do it in this music form, in this poetic form, where, people will actually listen. Because I never really thought anybody would read a book, right? Like it's very rare in the hood. So that's where I started with like, let's do music, and put it to this fire beat that has people nodding their head. And so I would say like probably 80% of the people who listen to a song can listen to the lyrics, then the other 20% just like the beat, so that's really where I decided to just give it a go.
Yeah, I mean, you raised a very good point in terms of, not a lot of people, or there's, oftentimes not a lot of people will pick up books, especially nowadays. But so you use the medium of hip hop to get a message across, and that's how you integrated your writing. Fast forward to, what was the process for you then to get to the point where you decided, you know what, I'm going to have to write a book now, or, I feel I need to write this Sisterhood book. And in fact, 331 pages of, of reading, of incredible reading, writing. So, how did you get to that decision?
Well, that actually started when I was 18. It was like that same dialogue that happened when I was 8 just kind of came over me and was like, I have to write this book. So that the idea started at 18, where I wrote down some of the homegirls' names, right? Like, these are going to be the homegirls in my book. Like, I knew what the book was about. I knew all of that. I knew how I was going to tell a story. But then, life happened. So it was like I was in massage class at the time. I'm writing these characters' names down. My notebook closes. I got to continue with massage school. So I graduate massage school. I get into the field of doing massage. you know, life is kind of a big struggle at this point. I've got a lot of personal issues popping off, and like the book isn't priority. But that thought, that seed was planted, right, at 18. And then so fast forward, my brother passes away. I find out I'm pregnant. I'm going through this struggle, you know, and then fast forward a little bit more, the baby turns into a beautiful 2-year-old boy, and he's pushing me as 2 years old. You have to do, you know, you have to get back into the studio and all of this. And so that led me to saying, you know what, I'm going to save up my money and I'm going to buy a computer so that I can dialogue all of my songs, right? So I can see them like in typing form. And then from there, I'm going to save them in different formats, like, you know, registering them and the trademarks and all of that. And so now I have this computer that I saved up for, and I'm like, oh my gosh, it has Word. Like, I need to write this book. So I start, you know, typing it. And well, the funny thing is, right before I bought the computer, that notebook I wrote the girls' names in came to me. It showed up, and I was like, oh yeah, right. So when I get the Word, I'm like, I just got to start writing. And so that's what I did. I didn't have an order, you know, I didn't know exactly, you know, how this book was going to look at the end of it. I just started writing and putting things in order as I went along, you know, editing and reordering. And yeah, so that's pretty much where it started. I was 25 years old when I started the process, and it was a slow, you know, you get in when you can. It wasn't something that I was like, I have to do this, you know, every day of my life. I wasn't applying myself every day. But it started at 25. I think when I was 28 is where I was like, okay, seriously, sit your butt down, get it done. And then, so yeah, like, by 30, it was pretty much accomplished, but there went life again, and I put it aside. And then at like, what was it, at 32, when my boyfriend broke up with me, I was like, I need to put all my energy into something good. And I finished the book, lost the book as soon as I finished it at 32, to the virus that, you know, took over that hard drive. And then I was like, that's not going to defeat me. Like, I'm going to do it. So I got that skeleton version in my email that I had sent myself a long time ago, and was like, I'm going to work off of this frame, and just kept going. And now at this point, I'm like, every single day, I'm dedicating an hour and a half to writing until the book is done. And then, yeah, I was able to finish it sooner.
Wow. Well, congratulations. That is heartfelt discipline and work. And so, you know, I can see it. I can, when I'm reading the book, like I'm picking it up, you know, I'm picking up all that energy of effort and work that went into it, because the descriptions are so detailed, you know, I mean, very detailed. I feel as if I know a lot of these characters, and, you know, I can get into, you know, the characters. But before I get into the characters, I'd like to know, through this process, you had to have had somebody out there that was supporting you in some form or another, or inspiring you to keep at it. Could you share a little bit about who, or who they were, or what it was?
Absolutely. The people who inspire me to get this book done is the people who have traumas, who have sexual abuse, domestic abuse, overdose in their families or loved ones, murders, occurrence, gang relations, you know, these type of people who I can relate to. I wanted to create a way to remind them not only that they're not alone, but hey, people get through this when they apply themselves, right? When they apply the healings and not become victims, because it's very easy to be a victim. And then we fall into drug habits and alcohol habits and prison and all of these things. But my goal was to get to these people and say, hey, you are loved. It is absolutely normal for us to be traumatized in our society, but that is not the end. Here go some tools read this book. The tools are in the book. If you read them and you apply them to yourselves the same way these characters do, you too can get further in life. You know, those were the people that were motivating me to do it, because I didn't have that. You know, I was very blessed to have my forms of ceremony where I can have my internal dialogue reminding me about how sacred I am and how, you know, the things that I need to do. But how many people have been given those tools? So I needed to, in my heart, provide those tools for people in a way that, you know, I could reach more people, because I, you know, yeah, we can do streams and stuff like this, but when somebody opens this book, it becomes intimate. It's like stepping into the living room with these homegirls, you know, and it's another vibration. And so that's why I thought it was important to pull it through this way, instead of being like, oh, I know what you're going through, let me tell you my story and take up an hour of your day, blah, 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 blah. When it's like, no, you need to be heard, you know, more than anything. So I feel doing it in this way of writing the book was a way for those points to get across, and that person to make a relationship with these characters. And I guess, you know, I think, I feel every single person that I come across will see themselves in at least one of these characters, if not more.
Yeah, that's what I really appreciated, because I felt that through the various chapters, each of the chapters are focused on a specific homegirl of the circle. So there's the strength and community of these women who all have their challenges, yet there are very common challenges between all of them. And
Right.
so they're each other's support system. So we're able to get that real clearly in the stories, but also I like that you provide the space for them and their individual stories to get deeper into their background and why they are the way they are, or what provides their resiliency, and what triggers them. So you get into very sensitive issues that you touched on earlier, which is the issue of sexual abuse, within neighbors, from 4-year-old to the issue of rape. And oftentimes those issues, they can be, when touched upon in whatever artistic um, medium, can be really so deep that it's very difficult for people to take in and process and feel as if there is some form of healing or hope. And I say that because I've tried to tackle those issues in the past in my artistic endeavors. But with your writing, the way that you cover those sensitive issues, you come to a really, real quickly, a resolution, a healing process that allows the reader to continue, being involved in there, and acknowledge that this is a real serious issue and it's heartfelt and you just feel it. But then, you bring in the resilient spirit that keeps, the woman going and alive. And you see it within the circle of friends and the support system. So I really, I was able to understand that with what you were sharing earlier, right? Not really coming off as a victim, but showing the strengths that have really allowed these characters to push through life. Um, Now, let me ask you, in terms of characters, which of the characters do you feel you most identify with and are, um, or I would say the most, your favorite character in the book?
I don't know that I have a favorite character. I think when I think of Isela and her personality, um, I think that's more my style. But I relate to each and every one of them. Like Miranda, she's got that pachuca style, or like the pinup styles. And if I could dress like that every day, I would, but time consuming. But also Miranda's relationship with her neighbor, her best friend, draws near and dear to my heart, and situations that I have, and the pain in losing that relative. But that relative still being connected to her through the spirit world. Um, and I think Gabby, obviously, she's a hip hop artist, and she's a singer, and she kind of like lives that life on the stage, but she also goes and does cultural stuff with Isela, right? Like they go and they rep for their communities, and they fight for the waters and for the lands, and all that quote unquote protesting stuff, that activism stuff that like we all have to do because we're indigenous. So I think that's very relatable. But yeah, I think they're all my favorite. and I can relate to each and every one of them, for good reason.
Now, oftentimes, yeah, the authors will integrate a piece of their personality in many of the characters. Is that the case for this book for you?
Definitely. And I really, a fun fact actually. So Denise, she's a homegirl. She's from the barrio. Um, and she likes to write as well. And so, but she doesn't really talk about it because she's from the hood. But there's a story that I wrote personally, Jessa Calderon, I wrote when I was 15. And it was for a class project, or, some English thing that I was doing. And I held on to it because of the words that my teacher was like, wow, you are a writer, like through and through. And the words of encouragement that, that teacher had given me was like, wow, it was homeschool, so it was a different vibe, thank goodness. And I decided to put that in the book. So that story comes from Denise in the book. And so I thought it was really cool that I was able to grab that 15-year-old me story and let 15-year-old Denise tell it in the book.
Yeah, so it sounds like, just until you were talking earlier about the tools that are needed for healing, because this is also a book about healing, about, poor working class, brown indigenous women who grow up in the barrios, in the ghettos, or, in the, you know, neighborhoods that are faced with so many challenges, oftentimes a lot of loss, right? So, speaking of loss, like there was just the traumas that are going on here, from being raped, which was a loss, right? From being sexually abused to losing, your homies, your close to heart friends and neighbors due to gang violence. Um, so through all these losses, there's always this hope. And what for you is the key thing, and if there's people out there that are listening to this, especially I think about the young ones, that at that age you go through difficult times no matter where you are and wherever you grow up. But if you're growing up in the barrios, in working class neighborhoods where the resources are limited, it's tripled, quadrupled the stresses.
Yeah.
Right. So what would you say to those that are at that make it or break it age, that are surrounded in these type of environments that oftentimes you really are just kind of, it's out of your hands to decide, what you want to do? What would you say? What words of encouragement or words of strength would you share with them?
I would encourage them to spend some time alone, because too often living in the hood, living in any city of the hustle and bustle, there's so much noise, and that, your homies telling you to take a left where you should be taking a right, your loved ones, family telling you that this is how you're supposed to be, like everybody has the answer for you, but not necessarily the best interest for your journey, right? Like your spirit knows your journey. Like what I would tell somebody sitting in front of me right now is that you are sacred and you are ancient. And even no matter how old you are right now, you're 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 34. It doesn't matter how old you are. The point is that your energy never dies, so that this body that your energy is consuming at this moment in time, or, utilizing, it's a temporary body, but the spirit continues over and over and over. So if you think about that, you're not just 10, 11, 12, 13, 34. You're ancient, right? And energy is so powerful, therefore you're sacred. And the fact that you were able to almost snap your fingers and say, I'm going to create life for myself and embody this being and utilize it to do A, B, C, D, that's powerful. And we don't stop to think about those miracles because we're so like trapped in this concrete jungle that we victimize ourselves as, the poor class, the, lesser than, and all of those things. But when you come to see yourself as sacred, as ancient, there's no limit to the things that you can achieve when you take that first step and make that journey. And the key thing is to step out of that victim mentality that's been placed on us. As soon as we step out of that victim mentality and say, wait a minute, I might be right here right now, but if I just sit here and complain about the situation I'm in, I'm going to wake up 20 years from now and be in the same situation complaining. But when I say, okay, I recognize and acknowledge that I'm in this situation, now what can I possibly do to get out of it and start making baby step moves? You wake up 20 years from now and you're miles away from where you were. Right? So start the journey today. Start changing the mindset. It's all in the mindset. If I believe that I'm powerful, if I believe that I'm sacred, if I believe that I'm ancient, if I believe that I'm worthy and lovable, then I'm going to start to embody that. But if I continue with the, I'm lesser than, I don't deserve because I'm poor, because I'm brown, all of that, then you're going to continue to embody that. So it starts with the thoughts, and then it goes into the energy behind it, the emotion, the feeling, and then it's the action. And anybody, take it from a sister from the hood, anybody can take the journey to bettering their lives when they take that first step. And so here I am, 12 years sober, constantly writing, as much as, writing songs, writing books, doing, the massage work and the energy work and the hypnotherapy and helping others to heal, because I'm helping myself to heal. So I'm able to take that journey with you all, because I chose to take that step.
Beautiful. So, you're talking about your decision in this personal journey, and it's clearly reflective, in the writing of Sisterhood. Now, you also integrate politics. You integrate politics in this wonderful book, and you integrate it in a way that there are these casual conversations happening amongst the homegirls, right? Can you share for you what was important politically to write about and integrate in here in your book with the audience?
Yeah, more than anything, I want people to understand that beyond politics, there's such thing as sovereignty. And we all have the ability to think and do for ourselves. So for me, it's really important for people to think outside of the box, because typically with politics, we're kind of like going with the flow of, well, this is just the way it is. And I want people to start thinking outside of that box and saying, well, there's other ways to think about things. There's the fact that it's not necessarily healthy and okay to rely on systems to get us through, right? Like that's why the book is called Sisterhood, because it's community. It's building community and relationships that, if anything, help us to help each other to get through things, but the idea of gardening versus relying on those grocery stores to always be there for us, and assume that they have the best interest in our health. you know um Watering systems, like there's all of these different systems that we can take initiative to build for ourselves in community, versus waiting for the welfare check to come through, or relying for any government to do anything for us. Like, to me, in my mind, that's a very foolish thought. you know um that's back to that victim mentality. I'm going to sit here and complain about how things aren't working in my favor because the government's not hearing my plea or what have you, right? It's where it's like, we have to take initiative. We have to take that step forward and plant that seed, right? Because when you plant that seed and you water it and you give it that love, eventually food, flowers, they sprout. And so it's that whole idea of like, there are other systems out there for us to utilize. We just have to stop allowing the conditioning to partake in the way that we're thinking.
Yeah, I really did appreciate how you did shed light on that, and that the there's distinct characters in the book. You have one character who's really focused on going to school, right, and going to college, whereas others are not focused so much on going to school, but they're doing good for themselves in different ways. And so that's what I really appreciate, is because you have the diverse reality of community in this story. Um, Whereas oftentimes politics is integrated into books that are more like theoretical, that are, college written and so forth, which is also good. But
Right.
I also love that you integrate both in here, that you have the ambitions, variety of ambitions from each of these women who are empowered and are empowering each other in different ways. I think about like what Miranda, I think it was Miranda who said this, but she was like, I think she was telling was she telling Gabby? She was telling somebody, just keep your head down and stay focused on going to school. Like, just keep your head down and just stay focused. Otherwise, you're going to get caught up with, getting in a gang or getting in here and there, and you lose track. So that's why earlier I asked, like, who is your inspiration? Who is your support? How did you focus? How did you decide to just focus on this and not lose track of your goals and your ultimate, vision, completing the vision that you wanted?
I'd have to say myself for that part, but I have to also give big ups to my brother Gilbert, because in so many ways he played the role of a parent in my life, of again, teaching me about that ceremonial way of sitting in silence, teaching me at the age of 4 how to read and how to write, how to read in my head at the age of 5 when I got on his nerves for reading out loud. It's because of him that I had a love for reading and for books. When he taught me how to read, I read everything. I read every billboard. I read every newspaper. I read everything because of him.
Mm.
He taught me how to sing, how to harmonize. Like, he is one of the biggest, not just inspirations, but teachers, I can swear to you that I wouldn't be here where I am had it not been for his teachings, right? But I do have to give credit to myself and to my son. Um, and to my son for, I hate to say this, but it's very true, that he gave me something to live for, because at the moment in time of his entering my womb, I wasn't living for myself. I wasn't loving for myself. I wasn't loving myself. I wasn't honoring myself. And when the idea of this child came into the womb, all of a sudden I was like, I want to love this child. I want to do good by this child. I want to give this child inspiration, somebody to look up to. And it was at that moment of like hearing you're pregnant, of saying completely sober. I want to be sober for this child. I want to be present, fully present in this child's life. And, once I took that step, now came the understanding of like, discipline is a thing. You either utilize it or you fall off every couple of days. Like, what are you going to do? So I made the decision to, every morning when I woke up, I had my conversations with my creator, right, with creator, and asking creator every single day, not just guide me and protect me on this journey, but give me the strength to have discipline. And that poured into all the avenues of my life, of healthy eating, of being mindful, of doing the healing work that I spent so many years of non-sobriety fighting and running from. And so now it's like, with sobriety, you have to face the crap, like really take it on head on. And so it took discipline to do all of those things. And then the idea of having an album, creating music, getting up in the morning and starting my routine to work out, going and taking on those massage clients, coming home and knowing that I didn't just clock out with my last client. Now I got to focus on the book. Now I got to focus on my music. And having all of that, I give myself credit for the fact that I didn't just check out every day at the end of a work day. I said, okay, I did my regular job, and now I'm going to go and do my entrepreneurial job and work for myself. So anybody who has any kind of dream, has to have that discipline to see it through.
Yeah. Well, I've been around a couple around you in a couple places where you've been able to promote your book. And one of the places that I recall is where we were last at, actually, out in Pala. Um, I think it was, I don't recall her name, but it was, I think, Myra's daughter. But
Oh, yes.
I think she was 8 or 9. But as
Yeah.
soon as I announced your book, she happily ran up to me and said, "Here." And I
Yeah.
looked at her face, and she was so happy. I said, "Oh, that's the one, her. You want her autograph?" She was so happy. And
Yeah.
I know that it's been brought up in other situations where you were promoting your book, like at Sherman High, and so many youth were so happy to see someone like them on this book, and to have you present in flesh, the author there to sign their book. What has that been like for you?
Well, first, I just want to say shout out Ruth, because that's the young woman that you just talked
Yes.
about. She's such a sweetheart. But honestly, it feels really good. Like, there has been times where my eyes welt up when I hear people say how they feel represented in this book. One woman talked about feeling represented because when she bought my book, she was wearing the basket hat, the California basket hat on her head. And she's looking at the book and she's like, this is the first time I've ever felt represented in a book, on the cover too, And just the other day, I was in Almani doing a reading, or El Monte, and I talk about one of the characters, a male, being sober, and choosing that life, but still hanging out with his homies. And so one homie, Jag, came up to me and was like, yo, when you said that part, like, and then, right after him, a woman comes up and talks about, the description of the way one of the women is growing up, with like having the Pachuco style family, and turning into that kind of background, that she felt that relation, and her growing up in the hood and feeling disconnected from her native roots for all the reasons that we have, right? The having to survive and just claiming Mexican and all of that stuff because it was easier in means of survival. So I have all these different ways that people are relating, and just to know that, I wrote this book as a means of healing, and it was a lot for myself, but I knew at the end of it, it would be for others who actually soaked it in, and to know that it's actually come to fruition and people are picking that up is just, it's heartfelt, and it makes my eyes well often, when I'm standing there hearing them. Like, it's very humbling.
Hmm. Yeah, well, I was wondering, what was going on with you and how that was making you feel, because I just see the happiness in their faces. Um, so you are impacting so many. Um, so I know that speaking of the physical, visible representation, can you talk a little bit about the cover, the art on the cover? And
Yeah, of course. Let's see right here.
there you
So this is an idea that I had in my heart. And I reached out to Solange Aguilar, who I've grown up with her in the powwow circle since we were just young little girls. And so she's grown up in California. She understands hood life. She understands California native life. Although she's not California native, she's grown up with. She knows more words in Chumash than I do. Let's just put it like that, right? Like she's grown up in our community, and I just thought, if anybody can pull across what it is I have in my mind, it's going to be Solange. So I reached out to her and I gave her the description. There's these girls, they're in a lowrider car. One of them's got like the Pachuca pinup vibe. One of them has a California basket hat. One of them has the braid. Two of them are in front of the car doing that homegirl slouch, shaking hands. And then she went as far as giving this character my moch. And she did it beautifully. And then I told her, I want the sisterhood to be like when you're tagging in your notebook in high school and you got like that gangster writing. I was like, I want it to look like that. And so she pulled it across very beautifully. And so that's how we got this.
yeah. Yeah, that's an amazing, beautiful, beautiful work. So, and it says so much, it's the various characters too, all weaved within the cover there.
Absolutely.
So can I ask you, has there been any review? Has anybody reviewed your book and provided reviews for your jacket, or has offered to review your book at all?
I honestly, you're the first one that I've had that conversation with. I haven't taken the opportunity to ask anybody, but I have had multiple professors say that they want to incorporate it into their classroom. So I can only imagine that review would come on its own eventually if I don't reach out and ask somebody to write that review. And I guess there's a part of me that just kind of feels like, I don't know, I'm not really wanting to go reach out and ask people, but this is my first attempt at being a writer, and so I don't know the journey so much as other authors. So I'm just taking it one step at a time, and I'm sure all of that information will unfold in due time.
Yeah, well, you're trusting this beautiful journey, and I'm sure that, you will get a great write-up, and it's just great because that's going to promote it some more. So if there's anybody out there that is interested and willing, please, let Jessa know, reach out to Jessa. Jessa, can you share your handles again in case those who cannot see it? Can you just kind of share a little bit about your handles?
Yeah, absolutely. When it comes to purchasing the book, it can be found at www.jessacalderon.com under the tab Sisterhood. You can also purchase the book on Amazon.com if you type in Sisterhood by Jessa Calderon. IG is Jessa_songwriter1. TikTok is the same. And then if you're trying to listen to the music or watch the videos, you can type in Jessa Calderon or Calderon on any platform that has music and music videos on YouTube.
Great. I'm going to get back a little bit into the book here. I was wondering for you, who is your audience? Who is your primary audience when you were writing this book?
Again, I'm going to have to say anybody who is dealing with these types of traumas that these characters are, going through. But the goal for me was really to reach a younger audience, to get from ages 12 to 14, maybe even 12 to 17, because that's the age that the characters are like dealing with their heaviest. Most of the characters, I know one of them starts at 4, or one starts at 4 months and one starts at 4 going through some harsh things. But I feel if I could reach somebody while they're young it could prevent a world of, physical, mental, and spiritual abuse to themselves, and so if I could just reach that young audience and get them to understand, tools that they're not ever going to get in middle school and high school, and how many parents just go, well, they're supposed to learn everything in school, but we're not learning how to heal ourselves. We're not learning how to love ourselves, how to respect ourselves and each other. So the goal is definitely like teach them while they're young. And I'm grateful that I have a lot of parents who have 10 to 13-year-olds, because I'm warning them like, hey, there's cussing and there's, rape and there's these things. And the parents are like, Jessa, I trust you. I'm going to read it first. And so it's been really good to hear parents say, I've read the book. I'm giving it to my daughter now. And
Mm.
I'm going to let her, pick up the tools.
That's great. Yeah, I wondered about that too. I'm like, I wonder, how parents are going to feel, because those are the sensitive issues, but they should be learning about those realities. Even the 4-year-old, right? The incident that occurs with the 4-year-old. So, if anything, it would promote conversation about these topics that are often not discussed.
Yeah.
So that's wonderful to hear that. Um, I also was wondering, you know, uh, is there a second book coming out anytime?
I don't think so. I think if I was to write another book, it would probably be more like full focused on healing more than like, these character type. I to be honest, I don't know. But I will say I have a feeling that this is going to be turned into a movie. I think that's probably the next step. So we'll see.
That's wonderful. Let's put that energy out there, everyone. You heard her. So
Yeah,
we'll have a screening with MDM. But
absolutely. I'm ready for it.
yeah. So let me ask you, we have about maybe 10 maybe minutes left, but I'm really interested to hear from people out there. If, for those of you who are on and listening, if you had an opportunity to read the book, purchase the book and read the book, please, if you have any questions, please drop them in there. We have Jessa right here who can, answer any questions related to the book or even not related to the book. It's an opportunity for you to get to know Justice some more and her magnificent skills. Like I started out from, hip hop artist, poet to published author, massage therapist. Here's your opportunity. Just drop your questions in there or any comments. Um, and while we're waiting for that, Jessa, is there anything else that you feel those who are listening? Is there anything that you think that any words of inspiration? I know you shared some earlier, but um, it takes me back to this conversation that we had earlier. I think you mentioned that you decided to write the book the way you wrote it in the language that you use, in the hood language, the real raw conversations that take place, because you in part were inspired by Luis Rodriguez. Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Well, yeah, actually, when I first read Lewis's book, Always Running, I was inspired at that moment because like I knew I always wanted to write. I knew that was a passion of mine, but to see firsthand that somebody who had grown out of a struggle, right? Because he has a story of his own about struggle in the barrio, and to see that like despite all of the things he faced in his life, he still took those steps forward and said, I'm going to do something. And he did it. And I admired that so much. And it always stuck in my heart. Like, I'm going to do something like that. I just, when like things align and you have that moment of something stays with you and maybe at that moment in time, you don't 100% know how or why or what, but there's something there that says, I'm going to do this thing. But I will say about the lingo, when I first wrote the book, I tried to be very clean. I didn't want any cussing. And I'll admit, growing up in the hood, all of us homegirls called each other bitch. Hey bitch, I love you bitch, be safe bitch. And I wanted so bad to remove that language from this book and change that word to sis, right? To remind us that like the way that we speak to each other, it speaks volumes to how we move forward. And I wanted to bring some healing, but the writing was so clean that my dad made a comment. He's like, that shit sounds fake as fuck, and I was like, damn. You know what? Because my goal was originally, and Lily asked, like, what was the age range that I would recommend? I wanted it to be able to go into elementary school, so I wanted it to be completely clean. But I realized, I was like, I'm not being authentic to myself. I really am not. And so I said, fine, I'm going to just cut it raw. I'll still try to be as clean as possible. But like, there's going to be some things that you can't bypass, like the way the homies talk, like I think what I was doing at the time too was also being worried about my image of how, working with youth, how I would be portrayed for myself. But I had to remind myself, at some point, these are characters. These are characters, and they don't all represent me as an individual. Like the homies in the hood are still the homies in the hood. And so when I like gave myself that permission, I was able to just open up and expand and let my genuine self shine through there, and the genuine relationships that I've had growing up in the hood with others and our stories, were able to shine through with the type of wording that would really pull the story together the way that it did.
Yeah. Well, I think that was a, great decision, Jessa, because it is about being real and raw. And you sense it right away. This is a true story here. It's not, you weren't mm, cleaning or sanitizing it in any way. Like, so that's why it's also so impactful. Um, so, and I appreciate that. And I also like, Lily did ask what age recommendation for the book, right? But the story you shared earlier about a parent reading it first and then sharing with their child is also a great choice. But this is wonderful. You see that people are getting their students excited to read it with them. Yay, that's what we want. We want to
Absolutely.
make sure that a lot of people, especially young women, that women read this because it's an empowering writing on so many levels. And we need more of that. And more than anything, it stresses the importance, as the title reads, sisterhood, because you can't make it in life without that genuine sisterhood. I like how you write about the celebrations, but you also write about the grieving processes that go on, the traumas, and how everyone is holding each other in some form or another to help each other get through it. And that's what community is about. That's what healing is about. And so that's why we thought about having you here for Writing Wednesday, because May is the month, the Mental Health Awareness Month. And it is about promoting that, mental health awareness. There's so much that happens. Everybody has a different path in getting to that healing place. And they're at a different point in that journey. So the other component that I liked is that you share the different tools throughout the journey of these women, right? And I think back, I think, geez, man, if many of us had, like you were saying earlier, some of these tools, even let's say simply meditation, if there was meditation implemented in the elementary schools throughout all of LA County,
Yeah.
how many youth would be so relieved to know that they're going to make it through no matter what, because it doesn't cost except time and focus to meditate, right?
Yeah, to
So
connect with yourself, right? And how we're so disconnected, and our schools are constantly pushing that conditioning of disconnect. I agree with you wholeheartedly.
So I love that, you have the different tools integrated in this book, in this story of these amazing women. And, before we close out again, everyone, please, please, shout out to Jessa. And, Jessa, please, let everybody know where they could purchase the book one more time, and just kind of put it out there for those to grab their book before they all sell out.
Absolutely. But first I want to mention, even though it's called Sisterhood and they do grow this community, our sisters are also uplifting our men in this book as well. And there is a young brother in this book who's a part of this journey with these young women, and he also succeeds in life, because he has these women to push him in the right direction, whereas he keeps making that left turn and they keep pushing his ass back to the right, and we do need to hold each other accountable for that as well. So I want to make sure that the young men also know that they are included in this book, because we do need balance, and so it's powerful to have these women in our lives that help us, guide us, because they're so loving, like the way feminine energy is. And so the book can be found at www.jessacalderon.com and click the Sisterhood tab to purchase, or you can go to amazon.com and type in Sisterhood by Jessa Calderon, and the book will come up there. Or you can Venmo me and put a private comment with the address and that I'm paying for the book, and the or yeah, like that, and then we can go from there.
Beautiful, beautiful. Well, I thank you so much from the bottom of our heart. Mujeres de Maíz thanks you so much for accepting the invitation to have a conversation with you about sisterhood and all of your wonderful work that you do in the community. We wish you continued success on promoting the book, and all of your creative endeavors and in our healing journeys. Um, so, with that, I want to thank everybody for tuning in. I also just want to remind everybody that Mujeres de Maíz is having a live art show, May 22nd, Sunday, at Self Help Graphics. So that's Sunday, May 22nd at Self Help Graphics from 5 p.m. to 9 p.m. And everyone is invited. Please come out there and enjoy some live music, live entertainment, support the local artists, the vendors, and just be in a space where we celebrate each other. So please make sure to head out there and also check out some of the programming that we have throughout the month with We Rise. Um, I know we're all busy and looking at different things online, but if you get a chance, go into mujeresdemais.com and look into some of the medicines that we have there, the different programming. So again, thank you, Jessa. You want to give a last shout out before we close out?
Yeah, I want to shout you out for having me on here. Thank you, Maritza, and thank you to all of the mujeres at Mujeres de Maíz for always, not just today, not just with this book, but always showing me and my family, the utmost love, and know that my whole family loves and appreciates you all. Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, everyone, we're tuning out. Thank you for joining us, and have a wonderful rest of your week. Thank
Bye,
you.
everybody.
Bye.